Beauty from the Shelf is a podcast where industry experts fill in the gaps that are integral to growth for early stage beauty founders and brands. Today's episode includes a really fun conversation with a friend who I've known for a number of years. I'm joined by Sally Miller of Womaness. We talked a lot about how Sally came up with the idea of creating Womaness, the number of years that Sally was thinking about creating products for this specific category, and also how she's leveraged all of her different backgrounds and ideas to really bring this brand to life. Here's a snippet from our conversation today.
I spent my 35 plus career building brands for women. Started at Target Corporation, was a merchant, worked in the marketing area, overseeing a lot of the apparel marketing, the designer program, had an amazing career there. And then started my own business in 2010 and spent 12 years really working a lot with the Who What Wear team, went in-house as the chief brand officer at Who What Wear and helped really build Who What Wear from a fashion media company into a very successful line of fashion at Target, expanded that internationally. Also helped incubate Versed, which is a clean skincare brand, among many other things, before I started Womaness. So launched Womaness in March of 2021. So it was really the natural progression of my career that led me to starting Womaness.
Now let me tell you a little bit more about Sally. Sally is the CEO and co-founder of Womaness. Sally spent her 35 plus year career building brands for women. She spent a big part of her career at Target running marketing for apparel and similar categories. Then after she left Target, she created her own business and helped build Who What Wear as a fashion and media company, brought that to Target and to other places across the globe, and eventually created that into an apparel company. And she also created Versed. Sally finally launched Womaness in 2021. And I said finally, but we know that this likely is not her final chapter. I really hope you all enjoy our conversation today as we talk a lot about what it's like to create a new category and some of the challenges that a lot of founders face when you're creating something that is not only new as a product, but new to the consumer. Let's check out today's episode. I absolutely love your background, Sally, because I think you have just little bits of all the things that allow you to really bring a brand to life and to commercialize it. And it's funny, now that we talk about Womaness, I remember when we first met, I was a buyer at Target on the healthcare team, and nobody really dressed like, I'm going to say trendy.
Yes.
And I remember seeing this group of women.
Other than you.
Right, other than me. I was like, I'm going to show up dressed, even though I'm not in apparel, right?
Yes.
I'm buying tampons and sanitary protection napkins. And I remember seeing you and your team, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you all are so fly. What are you doing here?
I know.
Like,
I remember that moment.
And I remember
it was so fun.
It was so good. And I feel like at that time, I had shared with you what I was doing in we'll call it the menstruation category and categories around, women's health, if you will, or just all of those different stages. And we had a moment in connecting at that point about menopause. And I was like, oh my gosh, I think there's so much white space opportunity there. And this was back in 2016, maybe, or 2017.
Yes.
And so obviously Womaness, or this idea, has really been on your radar for a while. I would love for you to just share how you got the idea from it, or how you really realized, okay, now I'm ready to take this idea that I've had for a while, and this is how I want to commercialize it.
Yeah. Well, I do remember that day meeting you, and it was so inspiring because we were on the 16th floor and we just all of a sudden became headlocked, I swear. And we exchanged personal contact information. So it's been so fun to get to know you over the 5 years, right?
I know, it's wild.
6-7
Time
years.
flies.
Yeah. I know. But, much like you, I've spent my entire career really trying to find the next white space and assess opportunities. Even when I was at Target, I was evaluating all these proposals, or different designers or brands would, pitch to us, and I'd have to really evaluate whether, they were going to be as big as they claimed they would be. So again, I've just always loved the consumer research side, taking the research, the insight, really understanding the consumer and those consumer shifts. And then I really identify the needs and the wants coming out of that and creating products and brands to service what they're looking for. So Womaness really came about from that passion to always finding white spaces, but also, almost most importantly, my own personal experience through menopause. So when I was working for Who What Wear, I was traveling a lot from New York to LA, and really, found myself very exhausted all the time. And I blamed a lot of it on stress. It was like I was exhausted, my libido was suffering. All of these now symptoms were really affecting my life and my whole lifestyle. It wasn't anything, life-shattering or that kind of thing, but it was just affecting me. But I didn't realize it was menopause. I thought it was just stress and travel. And it wasn't until I finally, I think it was like probably 2018, 2019, I set up an appointment with the Mayo Clinic, which isn't too far from my home. And I thought, I'm just going to have a physical there. And I found myself in this really great conversation with a female doctor in the Women's Health Center. And she educated me about menopause. And she said, Sally, you're not alone. I see patients all day long with the same issues, whether it's, sexual wellness issues, sleep issues, that could be affected by night sweats and all these other things that go into it. And I thought, oh my gosh, I have really misunderstood menopause. Here I knew I was in it, but I didn't realize that there were so many symptoms related to menopause. But at the end of the appointment, Monique, she gave me a list of products for me to check out on Amazon. And you had just obviously disrupted this whole space of period care. And when I went on Amazon to look at these menopause products, whether they were supplements or vaginal moisturizers, I was appalled. I was appalled at the offering and just the lack of clean formulations, and everything seemed outdated. They hadn't been touched in decades. And that was really my aha moment of thinking, I should tackle this space. Here I had been working in apparel and, skincare, but what kind of impact could I make for women in menopause? And when I really started to do the research, I realized there's nothing out there. There's also not a brand that is really respecting women over 40, whether it was another beauty brand. There was just kind of like this bleak, industry out there, and the way we portrayed women. And there's so much need for reinvention in marketing, but also new innovation in menopause.
I totally see that, because I think about there's a social media post that has gone around at one point that shows women in their 50s in the 80s, and there's a picture of the Golden Girls. And then it shows women in their 50s like now, and it's like J-Lo, Tracee Ellis Ross, like these women that are, we would still call bombshells, right?
Right.
That we clearly had a very different lens on what these women look like then. And no shade to the Golden Girls, right? But just really showing how that then translates over to products, to your point, and how you then communicate to that consumer. You want to call it the value or the full identity that you provide to that consumer, right? Is it just, I'm just giving you a product and we're not going to talk about it? Or, you're kind of getting into that. Who is your muse? What do they do? Do they drink Starbucks coffee? All of that. Like, you kind of really get into that, and you can say, there's more layers to this person and they care about it a little bit more,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're also trying to change the perception of aging. Menopause doesn't affect, it's really not even such an age thing. You can be in your 30s and get menopause or start to go through perimenopause. So I think a lot of it is educating society about menopause and making sure that they just don't automatically think it's for a 65 to a 70-year-old, because it really can affect women in their 30s, obviously 40s is probably more the sweet spot. And then 51 is the average age of women going through menopause in the US. And menopause is defined by 12 consecutive months without a period. And then you're in menopause. So it's, this whole perception too of because you're not fertile anymore, you're not giving back as much value to society. And that is just so wrong. And I think women are really standing up and saying, are you kidding? This is like the most powerful years of my life. That's when I'm going to start my own business, or I'm going to do what I've always wanted to do. And so many women have this sense of this fervor inside of them that they finally activate, right? And I think it's just so exciting to see what everyone's doing at this stage of life and, what's to come. Because I think as the generations before my generation, so the millennials, like your generation, and even more the Gen X age into menopause, I mean, it's going to change so dramatically for the better.
No, I believe that. And so just transitioning, you really created a category with Womaness. I mean, there were products that were out there before, but they weren't in mass distribution at retail. And a category, for those who are listening, because everyone might not know, is really how many food, drug, and mass retailers merchandise items in the store really for easy navigation. So you kind of know, if I go to a store and I need toothpaste, I'm going to look in the personal care aisle or somewhere near oral care, health and beauty. Generally speaking, you understand that's the category where I go to buy toothpaste. And when you think about, products like these menopause products, there's first a question of where do I go to find them, right? Because there weren't any menopause products available at mass in the store. So I know it's great to be a first mover, right? You all got placement at Target, and so that has its benefits. But I also know that it has its challenges. So I'd love for you to just talk about what it's been like to create a category, leverage insights. Are you figuring things out and adjusting as you go? I'd love to just hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, we like to say that we have created a new category. And the reason why it also is a new category, it's really designed around the major symptoms of menopause. So we have supplements, we have skin and body products, and we have sexual wellness. And what our customers have told us is that they really do want to see a menopause section in the stores. And they want to be able to see all the product together so that they can really connect the dots and realize that, oh, my sleep issues are related to menopause, or my, of course they think hot flashes with menopause. It's all the other symptoms that they're not necessarily thinking about when they think about perimenopause or menopause. And so by creating a total solution that's built around the customer and, what she's going through is really why it's a new category. And, using, clinically proven ingredients in all three different categories so that there's kind of an overall trust built, an overall product promise, and you don't have to do your own curation. So I think that's another benefit. I think back to your point, why it is challenging being, the first mover and building a whole new category is that retailers in general, they don't have menopause sections yet. I think that they're all working on it. I think they realize that, it's been a lot easier for the consumer to shop online because she can research, she can learn about menopause, then she can find the product on Amazon or in our case, womaness.com very easily. But how do we make it easier for her to find these products in store? So, for example, we're all pulled together in one section at Ulta Beauty, and that's been a huge win because we're in the women's wellness wall and we're all there. And she can, like I said, connect the dots and understand that, oh, the products are for, all the different symptoms that she's experiencing, because most women experience at least 2 symptoms.
That's really helpful. I know that those conversations can be difficult too to have with retailers because, we've both been on the retail side and obviously on the brand side. And you always know what's best for the brand, but sometimes those things don't always match up with either where the retailer is. So How have you navigated those conversations, assuming you've had some where you're saying, hey, retailer, I think that this is the recommendation. And the retailer says, nope, we're not able to do that. How do you manage those conversations? Does that impact your sales? Do you then go back and say, hey, let me bring this up again? Is there marketing that you can do to solve for that? Like, how do you manage that?
I think it all comes back to presenting the case or the pitch by backing it up with research. If the customer is voting a certain way, that takes the emotion out of it. That takes my own personal bias out of it. And so I think it's really important. And that's why we've done so much research with our customer. And now that we have, well over, 100,000 just getting our email list, we have a lot of access to customers, and they all are so passionate about what we're doing that they are very open to completing surveys. So I do think it's important, though, to not only do quantitative surveys, obviously, or qualitative surveys, but also get in the stores and do shop-alongs. Because sometimes when they're filling out a survey, they might think that shopping, they're sitting on their computer and they're trying to answer these questions. They might think one way, but when they get to the store, their behavior might not reflect their survey results. So it's really important to do kind of a couple different methodologies of research. And, I do think testing, like most retailers do want to test. They're really open to testing. I think we've also presented concepts to help influence retailers on how it could look. How could it look on the shelf? And so I think it's really important for the brand to do a lot of the work and to think like a retailer, but bring in the customer research, bring in those insights. Don't make it about what you think, make it about what the customer thinks.
Yeah, I always would love when brands would come in and give me an idea of what they were thinking when I was on the retailer side. And that didn't mean that I moved forward with what they presented. But it's always nice to see how you envision it so that I could then kind of incorporate that in or say, what things might I want to adjust to bring some of this brand vision to life? And I think, you mentioning Ulta, I think they're one of those retailers that do a phenomenal job of really telling brand stories because of how they merchandise things. They allow those shelf strips to really allow the brands to have their own creative freedom to share the things that they do. Sephora is another retailer that comes to mind when you think about, you go there and you feel like you're almost immersed into that brand specifically when you're at the shelf. And so that's just something really, really interesting to think about. So
yeah, they've done a great job. And they use their headers to almost help with navigation, but they let the brand really sing at eye level.
Yes. I love it. So as a fairly new brand, you talked about, bringing in the insights for the new category and really working with the retailer there. I'd love to kind of talk about new items, because in creating a category, you don't necessarily know if a new item is working or if it might just be that it's still new, right? So you're still reaching new consumers. You don't know if this is actually something that doesn't work or if you need to give it time. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how you judge if a new item is working or if you haven't given yourself enough time, knowing also that retailers probably give you a little bit of a push or a nudge in that area as well.
Yeah. And I think in the beauty industry, there's so much pressure to bring in newness. And what we have decided to do, because we launched with 13 products, that was, again, designed around the major symptoms. And we were pretty right on with what we thought the hero products would be. So, that was really helpful. We had no idea the scale in which some of the products would sell. And so we had a lot of out of stocks the first year and that kind of thing. And obviously it was always fun with supply chain issues. But what we have found is there's so much pressure to bring in newness, but the consumer, while she does want some newness, she doesn't want to be overwhelmed with too many choices. And so we're more in the camp of every single product that we introduce has to really, really fill a need and not just add complexity to her regimen. And I think, you get in this trap, right? In color cosmetics or in skincare or even hair. You're constantly introducing new products because that's what the retailers really want. They want the new story. The press wants the new story. But you really do have to be super disciplined about that. But what we do is we really do a lot of research. Now that we're established, we obviously do even more research with our customer and what she's looking for. And then we do a lot of focus groups with specific women that have signed up to be part of our close product development group. And then we start to really understand from there, okay, what are they asking for? Maybe there's 5 or 6 things they're asking for. And then we go through a ranking process. And then we do our own kind of assessment of the opportunity. But there's so much you can do from a marketing standpoint to almost relaunch products. And I think you're right, Monique. It's like we have to realize we're only 2 years old. We're constantly getting new customers into our brand. So they don't even know about some of our products, right? They might have just come in for one item, but really exposing them to some of the other really great products is super important and almost gives this perception of newness.
That's really good. I like that. This idea of when you bring a new consumer in for one product, don't assume that they know and understand your full product line.
Right.
That's crucial. I also love that you talked about doing research. And as I think about, I'm sure that a lot of that research and those questions are specific to your products. But one thing that kind of rings true across any product is price. And I wonder if you leverage those research groups to understand, are we priced at the right price? I know you all, once you kind of go out to the market with one price, it can be a challenging thing to change that retail. But given that, I'm wondering if you can just talk about how is this the right price? If you have any advice to brands that are setting their retails now so that they can say, hey, should you go a little bit higher than you think? Do you keep in mind the retailer that you're working with? All of the above, just your thoughts on pricing.
Yes. I mean, I think, our price points are really sharp. Our average price is $27. And, at times I think, oh my gosh, we're priced too low. But we so believe in bringing value to the customer. And I think in the long run, that's the right thing to do. We did set our price points at the very beginning. A lot of it was just collaboration with the retailers. Specifically, Target had a lot of say in those retail price points. I think some of it is just doing your own homework of who's your competitive set. Are you going to try to be positioned in the middle? Are you better? For us, it's like we're best quality, but we're better price points. We're not the lowest. So it's really, also being consistent with where you see the overall product piece of the brand positioned and not, be indecisive, right? You have to just kind of pick a lane. And so the customer isn't confused and the retailer isn't confused. So that's pretty much what we've done, because early on we did focus groups with women and they said, try to be really value priced, not the lowest price, but, make sure your products aren't too expensive. And what they were talking about is like $70 for a moisturizer, right? So we chose to be $24.99 as an example. So they wanted to be able to buy multiple products. And instead of maybe one, every year or two, they wanted to be able to buy multiple. So that's why we chose to be really sharp in our pricing.
That's good. And I think to your point, doing that research, that allows you to know where you're going to be. This is not to say that it's a right or wrong choice if you choose to be super value and you're under $10, or if you're at the price point that you have at $25, or if you are more prestige. You just then kind of know first what retailers you're likely going to be able to talk to, depending on how you set that retail, but then also what consumer you might end up attracting as well.
Yeah, I think another good point is the distribution. You've got to think through all of your distribution strategies over the next, 5 years. Do you want to be in the Walmarts of the world, or do you want to be at Ulta and Sephora? I mean, it's really important that you think through that. And I mean, that really does start to shape too what kind of, price retail positioning you're going to have for your brand. So we did that. It's really important to do that at the very beginning and make sure that If e-com is going to be a big channel for you and your brand, are you able to make money? Let's say you're pricing your product more at a Target and Walmart level. What does that do to your e-com business? Because it might be very challenging to make money on your own e-com channel, right? When your price points are, I'm making this up, $15, right? Or $10. It's very, very hard. You're going to end up selling bundles. So you have to really think through all of the various channels and the implications for your pricing.
That's really good, especially that e-com piece, because we see supply chain and shipping costs are only rising. And so making sure you have enough buffer to allow you to still make money and to not necessarily be going out to your consumer and issuing a retail price increase, 1 or 2 years in is important. Doing that research ahead of time so you can avoid that.
Right. Absolutely.
So given all of the other places you talked about, working at Target, being both a merchant and being in marketing, then you talked about working with Who What Wear collection, going in and working with Versed. You have launched a number of brands, and now Womaness is, added to your list. I'm wondering, what has been the biggest learning or the biggest difference, right? Or both, we'll say, with launching Womaness versus those other brands that you had been with before?
Yeah, I mean, it's different demographics, right? Who What Wear was much more millennial, although I do think it crossed over into, multiple generations. And Versed was obviously more of a millennial brand. It still is to this day. Again, all these brands do have elasticity. There's older and younger consumers that are buying these brands. But obviously, these brands all have their sweet spots. I think what's so interesting with Womaness is just the role of education and breaking a taboo and a stigma is so different than selling like fashion. It's either like you get it or you don't. With Womaness, it's much more of like, we joke on our team that we've had to spend 2 years rebranding menopause. And, we've been trying to launch our own brand at the same time, but we've had to first almost rebrand menopause and change the conversation around menopause. And so now that we're 2 years in and everyone from Oprah and Drew Barrymore and Maria Shriver and Michelle Obama, they're all talking about menopause. While we still have to educate, we don't have to rebrand menopause as much as we did in the first 2 years. Like, it's now time to really focus on us, right? And what we do to help, women. So it's been a really interesting case study. I always say to my team, it's like Harvard Business Review case study, because it's like marketing to a consumer who's been largely ignored. She's very discerning. She's kind of skeptical until she hears something to make her not skeptical, right? She's just not triggered, from like a quick social media blast, or she's not going to respond if there's a TikTok that goes viral. We've had our own virality, but it's not something that is your typical like Gen Z or millennial virality. It's very, very different kind of marketing. You have to build trust first. And I think in some cases, a fashion brand and some of the other brands, it's not as important, right? It's just like, oh, it's cute product. I love this brand. It's quality. I like the style of it. I like the influencers that wear it. This is very different. This is a very different consumer mindset and super discerning customer.
That's really good. I hadn't thought about the relearning that needs to happen, but that makes total sense given the stigma around the category. The fact that it's not even something that is discussed. Oh, I'm trying to think of what like my grandmother would call it. It was like, oh, you're going through, it's escaping me. Yeah, the change. That's what they called it. Okay. Oh, she's going through the change. And it's just like, what the heck is the change?
I know.
As a young kid, I heard them be like, oh, it's the change, So if that's what we're calling it, right? We're calling it the change. you can imagine, trying to say, well, what are some of the symptoms? Well, we're just calling it the change. They're not symptoms. It's just.
No, we don't want to talk about it.
Right.
It only affects, half the population and, affects 40% of a woman's life.
Yeah. It's a big chunk of our life. And I think it's all of the things. I feel like it's exciting. It's challenging. It's awesome to see that you all are doing this. And I know that there are other brands that are kind of, coming behind you all. And I see kind of a camaraderie also with the brands that are in this space. And I love to see it because you can tell you all are supporting.
We're all trying to help each other.
Yeah, because I do think there's enough space in the category for all of the brands that are, the key brands that I see out there existing right now to be there, to have a presence and to support each other. So I do love to see that as well. And perhaps some of that is because you all are trying to work to kind of destigmatize first and educate. And now I love that you said now you can kind of tell the story of your individual brand. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as I come to like my last question, I always say, this podcast is really focused on giving early stage founders, so think growing from 0 to 20 million, the tips and tricks to really grow their brand. So I love to just ask folks, what tools or tips do you or did you leverage that are low cost or no cost that you can share with other founders and brands?
Yeah, well, I think, because our story is very press-worthy, there's a lot of discussion, as you know, Monique, around women's health and the aging population. It's going to be the biggest population in the next, 10, 20 years, right? And people are living longer, so they want to live healthier. The woman going through menopause right now, if the average age is 51, she's in, a lot of cases, like the height of her career, although she has so many more years to work, but she's the sandwich generation. She's balancing so many different things. So it's really been interesting and it's a very press-worthy story. So what we did is we invested our own, I would say, energy, the money that we did have, although it was small amounts at the beginning, to really invest in press. And so my advice would be if founders are creating businesses that have a really strong mission, making a difference in the world, be really, really honest with yourself. Is there a story here that's really press-worthy? And it's not just product level press, it's like mission, brand level press. And in our case, we knew that we were creating something really press-worthy. So from the beginning, we said press is really, really important. And we've been on the Tamron Hall show 3 times. Our product appeared on the Ellen show 2 months after we launched. So we've had a lot of opportunity to showcase our mission and brand and educate women. And what's also great is we're able to go on a lot of news shows and just talk about the education of menopause. We don't even have to talk about our products. And, because we're now really perceived as experts in this space. And we can see that we drive more traffic to our site or sales go up as a result of it. So I think that's been exciting for us. I also think leverage your channels. I've really tried to leverage LinkedIn as much as possible. And that's essentially really free. But if you really become disciplined and provide content to your LinkedIn audience and grow that LinkedIn following, it's a really good channel. It doesn't maybe drive sales, but it will drive mind share. So think about those things that you can do to drive mind share versus just, of course, we all want to drive market share, but in some cases, it's as important to drive mind share.
That's really good. So many good things.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think of really low cost things that you can do. The other thing we did early on is we had a strategy meeting as a team and we said, okay, we know this customer is really, really frustrated with customer service for brands, right? She doesn't want to deal with a bot. She really wants a human behind the brand. And so, we have it in our original deck even that we were going to really double down on customer service. And we've done that. And I think that's also a really great way for us to build that brand love and brand trust. So just, I think brands should early on decide what they want to own and really like outperform on and really, try it out and stick with it as long as you possibly can. I mean, for us, customer service will always be part of what we deliver, but I think that's something that's been a low cost investment, but really, really high return.
And being honest with yourself and saying, that's the part that I heard that I think is really important. You said when it came to press, you asked yourself, do we have a story that is press worthy?
Right.
Right. So knowing, hey, there is a lot of stigma around menopause. This is a brand new category. With all of the growing population numbers, we know that this is going to be impacting even more people than we realize. Yes, this is press worthy because people aren't talking about it, but it impacts a whole lot of people and no one's really doing anything to modernize this, right? Yeah. So that I heard was really, really crucial. And then also, is what you're saying true to the brand? So for something like the menopause category for you all, you realize this is something that's important to the consumer. So tying it back to that customer care, they need to be informed. They need to be educated. It's important that they have that trust. That's why having that customer care is going to be important for you all, because that's going to allow the consumer to say, oh, even if I have a problem, they've got my back. They're there for me.
Right. Exactly.
So I love that. I think sometimes brands hear things and they just go, oh, I need to do that. But I always just try to connect it to say, this is why it works for this brand. And ask yourself.
Right. It might not work for every brand.
Exactly. Because, everything ain't for everybody, right? And that's true for brands. There's some things that work really well for one brand that don't work well for another. Every story doesn't have to be founder led. But I remember us having the conversation. I said, it makes a lot of sense for, you all to have that founder-led backing and storytelling, because it just, it aligns really well with how you came about, coming up with the idea and everything that goes into that. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, this is great.
Yeah, thank you. So much advice, and I love being able to share it.
No, thank you so much, Sally. I really appreciate it. Thank you again to Sally for joining me on the podcast today. I am so appreciative that I'm able to bring friends that I've known for a number of years on to really talk about the things that they do. And you can hear our love for retail and for building brands and all of those things in our conversation. As always, if you found this conversation helpful, I encourage you to share it with a friend or colleague. As always, leave a review, and I'll catch you on the next episode. Bye.